A moment of your time, dear listeners. We're not going to overlay this with piano, by the way. We're going to go a different direction. We are going to go for some kind of John Carpenter-esque, brooding, malevolent synth music, as though something heinous is about to befall you. Yeah, we really appreciated people getting in touch. A couple of extra donations. As we said, I think perhaps because of the nature of the three of us being quite heavily involved in music, we're particularly affected by the furlough and the lockdown, and albeit we've got some income just now, it would be great if the kind of 20 or so hours we put into this, I think each in total each week, we could somehow generate some income from that. If you guys appreciate it, and if, for example, if you bumped into us in a bar and you'd be like, oh hey, I like that show, do you want a drink? If you could sort of translate that into going on the Patreon, and the difference is, if you bumped into us in a bar and got us a drink, we'd be like, alright, thanks, get a nice smile, maybe a handshake. In the old days, a handshake.
In the old days.
But if you go on the Patreon, you get stuff in return, and if you go all out and donate beyond a certain level, you get some pretty smashing stuff. And even though the production of them has genuinely been halted by the situation, not by laziness or procrastination on our part, the people who are due a t-shirt, trust me, it's going to be worth your wait. It really is.
Yeah, they look fucking great.
Every so often I just go and reopen the files for the designs. I'm like, my god, they're amazing. So yeah, sorry, that laughter doesn't match that synth track. Okay, so we would really appreciate it if you went to patreon.com/unsungpod.
Yep, that's the place to go.
And subscribed in some fashion. All of these little incremental amounts that you guys give us in exchange for the time we put in really helps us stay afloat, really takes a lot of worry out of us. If we go to the bank account, we need to pay for another year's renewal and the money's there, then it's really good not having to get everybody to whip around. So yeah, thanks a lot. We're going to go in with the episode. It's a bit of an unusual episode. We hope that you were suitably menaced into donating. Thanks again to Luigi for the soundtrack.
Need to thank a few people as well, because we got a bunch of new people. Well, 4. So Ricky Stewart, who we know is a long time fan of the show, he's always posting or liking or commenting on our Facebook page, so it's good to finally have you on board.
Yeah, he's had multiple Nexi, hasn't he? Pulled out the
He has, yeah. Aaron Brown, who we also know is a fan, he's been quite active. Matt Robertson and Suffering Fools Records, that's what they put their name in as. So you're all fucking legends. Thank you very much for that.
Alright, let's get battered in.
Hello, Chris.
Hi, Mark.
It's a nice cup of coffee you got there. I like your mug. He's got a Morty mug, a Rick and Morty mug.
Yeah, it's a Rick Grimes mug.
Nice.
I caught my flatmate using as an ashtray, and I nearly threw him out the window.
Oh, that's some serious disrespect right there.
It really is. It's the worst. I know it's been washed many times by him, but you can't convince me. It's purely psychological, but I can still taste the disrespect of the cigarette ash in every mug.
It'll never go away.
It's total sacrilege. But yeah, it's a mug of coffee. Quite often when we do this, I like to have a little beer. It's a nice little ritual, but since we're recording incredibly early this week, it feels inappropriate. I think there's going to be enough of an epidemic of alcoholism on the other side of this lockdown without me contributing to it at 2 p.m.
What else are you going to do? Yeah.
I was getting one of the ways and one of the reasons I know there's going to be an epidemic of alcoholism is because we've been getting heckled online.
Saw that
in the middle of the day, and people are writing to apologise later on. I don't remember writing that. It's like it was 11 a.m. and people are just there's going to be a lot of detox and a lot of Alcoholics Anonymous happening.
Well, I mean, I guess we all cope in our own ways. Before I elaborate on why I just said that, David isn't with us this week, unfortunately, due to a family emergency. Not coronavirus related, which you might be all quite happy to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to know there are still serious medical emergencies that aren't corona related, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it kind of reminds you that there's actually stuff beyond coronavirus. So unfortunately he's not here, which means our J Dilla episode is kind of moved to next week, hopefully. But people are doing a lot of things to cope now, Chris, aren't they, during coronavirus?
They are, Mark. This is a top level segue that you're pulling together here. People are doing a lot of things to cope, Mark. Some people drink. Some people pretend they're going to finish the book they should have finished already. Hey, Mark?
Shut up. Leave me alone.
Other people perform acoustic bedroom sessions.
Shut up. Leave me alone.
A whole load of people do that. Yeah, as a fallback plan, once we found out about the situation concerning David, we were like, we need to think of something. What's topical and what will we have a lot of loud, uninformed opinions on? And that's a lot for me. But to narrow it down, I was like, man, so many people are doing those goddamn bedroom acoustic broadcasts. Can we tie it into that somehow? At which point Mark felt immediately attacked.
I haven't actually done one yet. I need to say, like, I keep hoping I'll get asked to do one, because my band, the other singer in my band did one like the first week of like lockdown as part of like an online festival, and then I'm just like, I've been practicing the songs. I feel like, oh fuck, I'm super up for this, and nobody's asked me to do it, man.
It's kind of a mixed bag here, because we're kind of lucky in some ways that so few of my friends actually listen to my podcast, because they're almost certainly a number of them are going to be offended by what I have to say.
So
and all I can say is, you know what you signed up for. You know me. Don't want to hear you pissing and moaning about it. All right, straight out the gate, a lot of these are really, really shit and really annoying, and there are way too many of them, especially right now for obvious reasons. So on that rough theme, I suggested, why don't we do something along the lines of sort of singer-songwriter soloists, rattle through some that we like, some that we dislike, a couple of aspects of it, maybe talk about why it's so prevalent just now, but then also I've put one aside that I think is a particularly good example of an unsung record, and Mark's done the same. But yeah, that's I'm going to have to fashion a more succinct title for the episode at some point. But roughly singer-songwriter soloists is what we're going to talk about here. So anyway, yeah, there's a couple of things. We do need to narrow this down, okay, because there's a lot of wiggle room in this. So I had a few suggestions, Mark. You can shoot them down or you can agree. What we're not going to do, we're not going to try and factor in like old school blues, like the kind of classic sense of acoustic singer-songwriter would be your original era blues musicians, Robert Johnson types, that kind of thing. It's not going to really entail that. It's going to be much more contemporary. I would say probably from the end of that American folk revival onwards, which is like 70s onwards, let's say. It's not going to be DJs or electro. It's not that. This is the kind of like grey area one. We're not talking about solo acts that are perhaps much more famous for having like a full band behind them. So someone like Björk Björk doesn't sit down on the Jonathan Ross show with an acoustic guitar. It's far more elaborate than that, or Bat for Lashes or anything like that, where it's essentially one person surrounded by a band. PJ Harvey's going to be an interesting one, because I want to talk about her a wee bit, because she straddles both of these, as we said in the PJ Harvey episode. I guess those were my only real caveats that I just wanted to try and delineate a wee bit and sort of steer us towards more or less people playing largely acoustic instruments. There'll obviously be backing musicians and some of it. That's unavoidable with solo acts, but
I was probably going to chuck in hip hop as well. Not that you would pick any anyway, but in case people wonder why we're not really talking about hip hop acts, obviously I'm a big fan of it, but it's kind of slightly different. These guys and girls and other genders, they do a lot of their own stuff, DIY, whatever, but it's not quite the same.
We're maybe making distinctions that don't need to be made. Most people probably get what you mean roughly when you say singer-songwriter, but just, to try and preempt outraged private messages straight off the bat. Yeah, so like I mentioned the American folk revival. So there was a kind of American folk revival in the 1940s when a lot of blues and folk and country started to sort of blend, and there was this big resurgence in the States. People like Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly were really prominent early examples of that. A guy who's really credited with playing a big part in the repopularisation of it is a guy called Pete Seeger.
Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone?
Funnily enough, I didn't really know this about Pete Seeger, but he was at one point accused of being a communist and was kicked off American radio as a result. But yeah, that American folk revival went all the way through the 40s, 50s, into probably the late 60s, and that, I mean, there's obviously a legacy of it, but the tail end of that is kind of generally considered to include Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, maybe John Denver.
You fill up my senses like a night in a forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a
Peter, Paul and Mary, that school. And I mean, just about every acoustic soloist has echoes of one of these people in them. It's kind of inescapable. This is a bit anecdotal, but I think there was something of an explosion of the singer-songwriter soloist thing again in the early 2000s. I think we'll probably mention quite a few of them. Certainly people like Bright Eyes and things started to become really popular around then. There was a big explosion of that kind of lo-fi emo scene.
Well, hola, 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 hola. Persuaded must be satisfied. You offer only one reply. You know not what you do.
But there were a whole host of others in the early 2000s, especially like maybe about 2004, 2005. You had loads of young women coming through. I think Joanna Newsom started around about 2004.
Mincing up the morning so lightly bored. Oh, whoa, whoa, morning without a warning, like a hole. Oh, and I watch you go.
You already had people like Fiona Apple and Tori Amos. Obviously, PJ Harvey, who I mentioned, she'd gone from being PJ Harvey the band to being PJ Harvey the solo artist by that point.
I can hardly wait. I can hardly wait. I can hardly wait.
So yeah, there was another big spike in it. I was kind of trying to work out or identify what might have brought that about. I assume on some level it's to do with home computers and home recording. I know because in the early 90s when 4-tracks and stuff became really affordable, there was a big jump in sort of lo-fi 4-track bands, like even bands like Troubadour and Pavement and all those kind of bands came about as a result of being able to record multi-track things so easily at home. But I'm guessing that maybe the early 2000s when, you know, processor power and, you know, sound interfaces and things like that became sort of affordable. That's a big reason for it. Do you see anything else that I'm missing?
I think there's probably like a big groundswell of people like you know, there's Jeff Buckley's, you know, Elliott Smith's as well.
Yeah.
Shown to people that you can actually achieve fame on your own and cultivate this sound, and it doesn't necessarily need to be by the usual kind of Bob Dylan-y, even Bruce Springsteen-y or Tom Petty style kind of heartland rock edge, you know, that it was a lot easier. And then you listen back to some of the early recordings by both those artists, they are quite lo-fi, and that was mid-90s. So, you know, I think a lot of influence probably comes from that as well.
There's definitely certain advantages that come with it. I think would probably account for its prominence from about 2005 to about 2010. I mean, 2010 and 11 is when you started to get people like Jake Bugg and things like that, and Frank Turner when we see 2012, something like that.
Yeah, he came from Million Dead, so that was like mid-2000s during like the whole emo thing when his band were involved with all that stuff. So.
So you started to get some sort of mega stars emerging. What's his name? Ed Sheeran was another one.
Yeah, I was going to pick one of his albums actually.
So
I was not.
I'm not even going to cut that silence out.
Just to see your face there. That's the only reason I said that.
So you started to get these solo megastars, And I don't, not like solo megastars in a Katy Perry way, but solo megastars in a sort of, well, look, that guy's on the main stage of Glastonbury with an acoustic guitar. What's that all about? We still have some of us. So I'll mention Jerry Cinnamon in a wee bit. But why was that? I think a big part of that is to do with the dwindling revenue in music. You know, if you were in a 4-piece band, you were dividing up a smaller and smaller and smaller slice of cake, 4 ways, 5 ways. You know, however many people had a vested interest or a share of royalties. And going solo meant that as the revenue dwindled, it was still kind of affordable, kind of sustainable to do it. I mean, I'm saying that it obviously had decreased massively, and I'm sure loads of struggling solo musicians would be like, "Not very sustainable for me." It's more sustainable than it would be if you were splitting the money 5 ways. It's just that just is just common sense. It also kind of suits self-publishing, as self-publishing became much more of a thing, as loads of platforms sprung up so you could self-publish, things like MySpace, nowadays things like Bandcamp, SoundCloud. It's much easier to run your own channels in these things. There's loads of people doing really well with YouTube, you know, subscribers getting private concerts and things like that, and it lends itself much better to that. One interesting side effect, and I'm kind of particularly aware of this because I live with a sound engineer, but it did lead to a drain of acoustic musicians from studios. If you look back through the history of recording artists, even like way back into the 50s and 60s, you know, if you look at a remake of Walk the Line by Johnny Cash and you see him in a room with a couple of really high quality microphones and they're performing in the middle of the room, that all had to be done in the studio. It all had to be done with the right equipment. And very rarely was that rule broken. There are examples of it being broken, live shows and things like that. It's really famous Bob Dylan live shows, for example. But by and large, it was still a studio thing. And then in the 2000s, you started to notice fewer and fewer and fewer of these solo musicians needing to go into a studio to record. And that actually led to a massive financial drain out of the recording industry. You were now reliant on bands, or you were relying on solo musicians who'd attained a level where they needed bigger production or where they could afford bigger production. But that's no small feat, because as much as you get more money from recording as a solo act, it costs more because there's fewer ways to split it at the lower level. So at that lower level, solo musicians often recorded stuff at home, maybe sending it away to get mixed or mastered, but they were kind of keeping the costs as low as possible now that they had that option. So it's an interesting genre that is maybe had a more dramatic correlation to the fates of the music industry than some others. You can really see when the money went, how much that changed, and when the money's come back, how much it's changed. It's an easy thing to swing into action if it's just you needing to write a set of songs and suddenly there's an opportunity. It's much easier to organise, it's much easier to pull together. So yeah, it's more flexible, it's more convenient, can be a bit more lucrative if it takes. Certainly now with the technology we have, there's less in the way of upfront costs. Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting phenomenon, and obviously the reason this is so relevant now is that it's blossoming in a moment in time when people can't go out and they're stuck in their houses, and we have this ability to broadcast, we have this ability to record at home, or we can order like a wee cheap sound card and then start recording at home. It's people want to create, people want to get something out there, they want to be busy, they need to be busy. It's obvious, and that there's such an overabundance, I would say, of this output now, and the quality differs wildly.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that this, in a way, that this kind of horrible thing that we live through is feels as though it's democratising live music and the creation and releasing of music. But you're right, you know, it's to me, I think of it as like you have to hit the Prince buzzer here. But
I knew you'd shoehorn that guy in.
But I'm thinking like him, probably Bruce Springsteen as well, like any number of massive solo artists, right? They're gifted with the ability to write songs like pretty much on tap. They write so many fucking songs that they know when to release something and when not to release something. They know what's good and what's bad, because they've constantly got that motion going, you know, that muscle's constantly being worked on a daily basis. A little bit of self-reflection from some artists might be quite good.
So
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you've basically pinpointed it's an interesting segue as well. What is one of the biggest weaknesses of solo performance, or at least solo projects, is that there is not a total lack, but certainly much less of a sounding board. There are fewer alternative opinions, less pushback. It's much more auteured by its very nature, and as a result, I don't know, even as a songwriter in the past, I have taken the hump with bandmates who have vetoed an idea, only maybe a year later to be mortified when I heard the demo and really glad that we didn't do it. And I think, yeah, so you get a lot more out there, and the quality, yeah, it's easy to get a wee bit, disappear up your own arse a wee bit in that scenario. I think it's easy as well for people who are very successful to disappear up their own arse, because, you know, they hear nothing but, you know, positive feedback that they want to hear, and then they don't have musicians or other opinions in the room with them as they're composing, saying this isn't quite as good as you did before. I would suggest that even though it's not a solo project, Weezer is an example of that. So I think it's a bit more dog eat dog with solo acts though, because I think it's probably easier to bluff your way to success as an indie band. You can be loud, you can be really produced. There are a lot of studio tricks that can come into play. I mean, I've heard very, very, very average bands sound incredible on record, and loads of them do, and they go on to be famous. And, you know, I think there's so many groups that fall into that category. But with solo acts, there needs, I think, to break to another level, they need to have some sort of you know, if it was a character in a video game, one of those attributes needs to be a 9 or a 10 out of 10. You know, there needs to be something key. Some people, it's their voice. You get people like Mark Lanigan, Tom Waits, that have these incredible voices. Some of them, it's like Lewis Capaldi, it's the personality. It's just this, it just override. I mean, okay, the boy's got a voice as well, but I mean, it's a bit, yeah.
Sounds like he needs to throw lozenge, really, doesn't he?
Yeah, but the guy has succeeded really on the basis of his personality. So other people, there's no denying it, male and female, succeed a lot based on their looks. There's just something really beautiful and charismatic. With some of the best ones, there's just eccentricity. There's something really compelling about the individual that just, you know, it's that je ne sais quoi thing. But I think it's very hard to succeed at the top level as a solo musician without at least one attribute, maybe more, that are pushing up to the 9 or 10 out of 10. You know, whereas I think there's loads of bands that just, you know, slouch their way to sort of moderate success with 5s across the board. No doubt. The poor musicians have just a bit of luck, you know, kind of have the right look at the right time, sort of accidental. You can it's much easier to fudge it, I think, as a band. So there's loads and loads and loads and loads of these fuckers playing acoustic solo music, but the ones that make it, whether you like the attribute they have or not, whether you think it justifies them making it or not, they do tend to have one attribute that is just very, very prominent, very in the high digits. But yeah, it's incredibly low rent. So the barriers to making it have, the low barrier to making it has meant that there's, especially now, just so much of it. The white noise effect. And that must be frustrating for the people that are exceptionally good at it and that are struggling to get noticed. You know, it is that thing of, without gatekeepers, we do still have some sort of gatekeeping of some sort in music, but nowhere near the way we used to. And whilst that's a democratisation of it, it just also means that sometimes if something's really exceptional and it would benefit from people being turned on to it, it just doesn't happen. So there's doubtless some amazing stuff that just sinks without a trace. The people end up working at the bank or Tesco, as it might now be. I mean, that's sort of a law of the jungle, I guess, where solo acts are concerned. Yeah,
you're right. It is dog eat dog, you know, and you know, I think people like things that are both familiar but also a bit strange, and having one of those attributes, like you say, that is like 9 or 10 out of 10 is going to be that defining factor. And you do get some solo artists that are who have sudden success, like for example somebody like Jake Bugg.
Forever ends, try to find it in a bottle and came back again. High on a hash pipe of good intent, but it only brought me down.
You know, who is just a poor, you know, and it's kind of baffling. It's probably down to look great enough.
Yeah, I think with him though, it's sort of, he's got the umami of like solo acts, which is a sort of slightly harder to describe, but he, much like Jerry Cinnamon, tapped into this accessible everyman quality I think to some extent Ed Sheeran did that, although it was a little bit more middle class. But he was sort of inoffensive, nice guy. Oh, ain't he cute, that wee ginger boy that was busking. But certainly Jerry Cinnamon and Jake Bugg, I've said it before, I don't listen to Jerry's music. I've a lot of respect for just how well Jerry's done, purely off his own back. That's brilliant. Congratulations to the boy. But I think they have an everyman quality. Yeah, that is in itself a really outstanding feature. Their normality is an outstanding feature, and that's not to be sniffed at. And definitely Jake Bugg, fuck me, I hate that guy's music. It's just, you can see why people latch onto it. It's Oasis fans. It's that crowd. It's the everyman that sort of music's a sort of passing interest to them, and this is their guy. This is their champion. This is them on stage. This is them looking at themselves as just a normal little guy on stage being famous. And yeah, I guess it's vicarious.
Shall I talk about some records that are not those guys?
Yeah, we should probably try and pinpoint what we think's outstanding feature of these as we batter through some names. I've got just a bunch of names written down in no particular order. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I was actually thinking about there's an artist that I probably will pick for this at some point down the line, and I have mentioned to you before. It's an artist called Marissa Nadler or Nadler.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure you pronounce it.
This are sad estrangement, idling there on the pavement. 119657 in the engine blue.
She is a acoustic sort of gothic kind of singer-songwriter, not quite Chelsea Wolfe style gothic, a lot more kind of like darker kind of folky stuff. And she is just an incredible musician with a great voice and a really good songwriter, great guitar player as well. For me, her album Songs 3, Bird on the Water, is just a total masterpiece. Mm-hmm. Her voice is kind of nice and ethereal. Her guitar playing is, the sort of finger picking thing, which is kind of cool, but she's got a knack for kind of going for interesting chords and kind of interesting progressions. And I really enjoy the way that she can be, or is often quite sparse, with extra elements of percussion or instrumentation, It does feel like something in an Edgar Allan Poe novel a lot of the time, or poem a lot of the time. But for me, she does have that quality of being an artist, which is just a little bit strange, and that's kind of the cool thing about her, it's a little bit off kilter, and I think that's pretty cool.
You mentioned Jeff Buckley, and I think around about that time, certainly like from the early 90s, there were a couple of like really standout names. I think Annie DeFranco would be one, Amy Mann probably another one.
What you want, now you can hardly stand it though, but now you know it's not.
Yeah, I mean, they used quite elaborate arrangements. They weren't strictly singer-songwriters. I mean, Jeff Buckley, as you mentioned, I suppose his father, Tim Buckley, as well. But they did tend to, use some pretty big band sounds as well. But then from the mid-90s through to the mid-2000s, there was a batch of like really, really high-profile, strong female artists, not including Björk, but certainly a bit truer to the kind of singer-songwriter format. You had Tori Amos, who we've spoken about before.
Had a northern lad, well, not exactly had, but he moved like the sunset. God who painted the...
She does at times have really big arrangements, but then there's a lot of stuff that a lot of her tours were just her and piano, so it's a very kind of pure representation of that. You had Fiona Apple, who I believe released an album quite recently to quite a lot of excitement. You had people like Cat Power emerging.
Is a dream that I see, I pray it can be across the land, shape this land, a wish or a command.
Of course, yeah.
Yep. You also had, I think, like mid-2000s, maybe early to mid-2000s, you had Regina Spektor.
And the history books forgot about us, and the Bible didn't mention us, and the Bible didn't mention us, not even once.
Who's sort of classed in with that as well. You've got a smile.
Yeah. she's one of those ones that's also like a little bit odd, a little bit eccentric.
Yeah.
I think all these artists probably fall in that category, which is perhaps why, you know, they stand out so much and why we still talk about them like after so many years, you know.
Yeah, she's creeping towards that Amanda Palmer sort of slight cabaret thing at times, but there's also some Regina Spektor stuff that's really, really beautiful. Yeah, so that's kind of like, I think that group of acts, that group of artists, and also PJ Harvey, I think would be factored into that, were really influential on a generation of young women who went on to emerge into that field of performance. For me, in the early 90s, I was a big fan of Sebado, and Lou Barlow from that band used to drop in and out of the band as a solo performer. He had a whole load of other monikers that he performed under, including, I think, probably the best and most well-known was the Folk Implosion.
Give your heart to a stranger, turn your back on a friend, walk away unafraid of the end.
But yeah, and as well as doing stuff under his own name, really good. He famously did like 3 nights in a row at Nice and Sleazy and had like a complete breakdown on stage, had a total nervous breakdown, and just spent a lot of the shows crying. I mean, yeah, pretty intense. We've spoken about Jason Molina.
Now sing it over the cradle of the child who's born next, the bad luck lullaby. Leave all the truth inside.
Of course, yeah. I was wondering if he'd come up in this episode because I think Songs of Hire, whatever moniker you want to put that guy under, he made some truly outstanding music, and I don't want to go too much into it because we've got a whole episode on it, which you should go and listen to if you haven't heard it.
You definitely
already
should. That's definitely one of our best episodes.
It's a great episode, and it's a great album.
We had, I mean, I guess you'd mentioned Springsteen. I think Springsteen's a really good shout, especially around about that Nebraska period. That's sort of template setting kind of album. It's so influential even for like a whole load of the sort of Bonnie Prince Billy, Palace Brothers type stuff as well. That really sparse kind of, those guys sort of emerged from like post-rock in a weird way. They like Bonnie Prince Billy and Palace Brothers and all those kind of guys seemed kind of tangential to stuff like June of 44 and Slint and stuff like that. They were sort of on the cusp of that. They were the kind of acts you would see at All Tomorrow's parties. You know, they weren't your kind of fuddy-duddy thing, but in their albums you could really see that it owed a debt to stuff like that Nebraska era Bruce Springsteen. There's something very naked in that album and very raw that I think became a feature of the kind of solo-y acoustic stuff, and I think Jason Molina's kind of part of that as well. I think going back a wee bit further, I suppose there's an artist called Kath Bloom. Do you know her?
No.
Is it Kath Bloom's? I think she's actually Indian, at least Indian sounding name in the world. But she's based in the States. She was in, is it Linklater? Is it Before Sunrise?
Before Sunset?
Before Sunrise, the first one, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a beautiful song by Kath Bloom in that called Come Here. Julie Delpy listens to it in a record store. It's a lovely song, albeit it's beautiful partly because Kath Bloom's performance on it is decidedly shaky. Like, in fact, her performance on a lot of her stuff is very, very shaky. She's sort of on the tail end of that American folk revival thing, and there's not a lot of precision in it. Do you know what I mean? It's certainly not from an era when autotuning was a thing. It's very unfussy, to put it politely. Kath Bloom's got some really nice stuff though, and none more so than that tune in particular, and it's really well used in that film. It's like a really beautiful scene. I would say that sort of in keeping with that as well, Judy Sill.
Love rising from the mist, promise me this and only this, holy.
that Jonah.
Yeah, I literally just googled that on my phone to remember the name of the album, Hartford. Like, if you didn't listen to a Jonah Matranga interview, then you should definitely go back and do that, because we talk about this album, and I hadn't heard it before that episode. I hadn't heard of her.
Me neither.
But this album is just stunning.
Yeah, that song "The Kiss" that he highlighted is
so good,
incredible. But it comes from an era when that unfussiness was just sort of, it was just there. It was part of the product. The nakedness, the rawness of the product was what made it so touching. Yeah, so I don't know, like coming back up into the more, well, actually no, before we come into the modern era, I want to say Neil Young, I think, is a huge trendsetter. And even though obviously Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, there's a lot of big band stuff, and in his later era when he became like fully electrified and all the rocking in the free world stuff, I get that is not really applicable as a singer-songwriter thing per se. There's this huge era though, that kind of, especially around about the kind of Harvest era, where he's just the absolute daddy of that stuff.
In armor, come and saying something about a queen. There were peasants singing and drummers drumming, and the archers split the tree.
You know, Needle and the Damage Done, that kind of, like, some of his more minimalist stuff, he's incredible. Like Heart of Gold is a wonderful example of that era of solo performers. Who else? I think Nina Nastasia. I mentioned All Tomorrow's Parties. Nina Nastasia, who I don't know if you're familiar with, are you?
Nope.
Really, like a terrific artist, like really, really good. She was around at sort of the same time as like Joanna Newsom and that were starting to really emerge. Cat Power as well. She was kind of part of that movement, or at least part of that scene at that time. And yet Nina Nastasia never really took the way the others did. She's got an incredible album called The Blackened Air. But my favourite work by her is an album she did with Jim White of Dirty Three.
We'll die, our eyes on spring. We'll choose someone to love again. We'll say we waited all our lives to meet this one.
I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's his style of drumming just complements it so well. She's got a beautiful voice. It's not overbearing. It's quite vulnerable, but yet she's very good with it. She uses it very well, but she does have some of that fragility in the music. There's some really wonderful stuff by Nina Nastasia. I think she's still going. I saw her at ATP once, and that she was tremendous. Coming on after a band, I think it was like Red Fang, you know, this sort of Alice in Chains light sort of stoner rock band, and Nina Nastasia came on and was just so much better than them. Who else? Did you ever listen to a guy called Cass McCombs?
Name's familiar.
So I think he was in Sub Pop, and he's another one. I was listening to Cass McCombs around about the time I was really into Elliott Smith. And I thought Cass McCombs was maybe somebody that would take, but he just sort of stayed in that sort of Sub Pop galaxy and then seemed to fizzle out a wee bit, but has some really good stuff. There's a track by him called Went to the Hospital. There's a really nice balance of sort of Fruit Bats, Shinzy type stuff, and then it's a bit bluesier though. Who else do we have? Well, obviously Tom Waits. We've done an entire episode on Tom Waits.
Yeah.
And as far as singer-songwriters goes, I mean, he is definitely still a singer-songwriter, and he toured, certainly his last couple of tours I think were just him, so he definitely qualifies in that sense. But some of the music is so far out there, very arranged as well, so there's some that applies more than others. I mean, Closing Time, the early stuff, definitely counts. Yeah. Who else? Joanna Newsom, obviously, especially around about the time of Milk-Eyed Mender, when the larger arrangement was less of an issue. She did a tour as well, solo, that was astonishing. Really, really good. She's a performer that, albeit I've always wanted to see Joanna Newsom performing with an orchestra. I've seen videos of it, and it is just incredible. Seeing her solo was also a mighty experience. Let's look somewhere a wee bit more unusual. Okay, so Albini worked with a couple of people other than PJ Harvey that were of note. An artist called Shannon Wright. Shannon Wright is, mean, she's worked with loads and loads and loads of musicians and is admired by loads of musicians that you would think would mean that she would be better known. For some reason, she has a really good following in the kind of alternative rock scene in France. I noticed that when we were playing over there, people played Shannon Wright all the time, and I was surprised at first that people even knew who she was, but it turned out she was quite a big deal over there. Really nice stuff. Avoids being too saccharine, which I think is kind of refreshing. There's a track by her called Sympathy on Challen Avenue, I think it's called. It's a particularly good song, but she's a really interesting artist, actually, somebody that's probably worth exploring at some point in a future episode. And I guess around about the same time I was listening to her, I was also listening to Scout Niblet, who we've mentioned in passing.
It's your little voice, it's the only way to relax. So you forgot what you sound like. That's no way to relax.
Scout Niblet's stuff is a lot more unconventional. I was also listening to her at the same time as Cat Power, and Scout Niblet was much more experimental, eccentric side of that. But I think she technically would qualify. Sharon Van Etten, early on in her career.
There were your eyes in the dark of the room, the only one shining, the only set I had met in years.
Another artist we've done an episode on, a particularly good episode I think, who certainly about the time that she was doing the Tramp record was very much of that sort of Brooklynite Starbucks sort of brand. You know, this is one thing about solo acoustic performers, especially, pardon me for clearly discriminating based on gender, but there was a sort of era of young women that did this very quite safe acoustic solo stuff that just really reminded me of the kind of stuff you'd find on the end of an aisle in Starbucks. There were a whole load of shows coming out on TV at the time, and like Girls and things like that, and they always seemed to have this sort of insert anonymous female solo act here, and very very few of them seemed to ever gain like a kind of critical mass. There was just this glut of quite similar sounding, very earnest acoustic solo indie rock, that kind of Starbucks rock or Starbucks folk. I don't know, it's something that some of them really fall into that, and I think like some of Sharon Van Etten's stuff did land a bit too close to that. We mentioned that in her episode anyway, that she was much more interesting when she pushed it in more interesting directions. There's probably, in fairness, there's probably a few of the acts in here are guilty of that. I tell you, a guy who I thought was going to be a lot bigger than he was, again, this was around about the Elliott Smith period, was Sufjan Stevens.
All the glory when you ran outside with your shirt tucked in and your shoes untied, and you told me not to follow you.
Do you listen?
Yeah, I've heard a few things about him. He's insanely productive, or was for a while.
Yeah, I mean, not as productive as he'd have liked to have been. He released a very, was it Michigan was his first album, and then he released an album called Illinois, which was, I mean, I think at one point Illinois was on Metacritic, it was like the highest rated album of the entire year, the year it came out. I can't remember what year that was, but it was so warmly received, this album, and people just thought this guy was going to be massive, and he released it as part of his 50 States series, that he was going to do an album for all 50 states. He did 2 and then he gave up after that one.
Nice.
And then he was like, oh, it was just a gimmick for publicity. It was like, yeah, clearly. But I mean,
nice
he has some really nice other things. There's some great individual bits of his music. There's 7 Swans, which I think was a sort of spin-off from like a different project. It's some fantastic stuff. His live videos as well online. There's a song called To Be Alone With You, which is a really, really beautiful performance online of that if you have a wee look on YouTube. But yeah, I always thought Sufjan Stevens was going to kick on more than he actually did. I guess he sort of like leads me into, there was a kind of phase, we touched on it earlier on, of like a lot of solo emo stuff. Now, even though Death Cab for Cutie have never been a sort of a solo project, I think Ben Gibbard and Death Cab were interchangeable in a lot of people's minds.
Love of mine, someday you will die, but I'll be close behind. I'll follow you into the dark, no blinding light or tunnels.
Has he done a lot of stuff away from the band, or has he always done it under that moniker?
Well, Death Cab's always been a band, you know, but I don't know much about them because I'm not a big Death Cab fan. There's something about his voice that just doesn't really connect with me, and the thing that I find quite weird about that is, like, I like a lot of the bands that are hugely influenced, or a lot of the artists as well, who some of which I'll talk about, who were influenced by Death Cab. Clearly a massively influential band in a lot of ways, but I cannot answer that question, Chris, because I am not immediately familiar with Ben Gibbard's oeuvre.
Well, I've nailed my colours to the mast on previous occasions about how much I like the album Plans. I'm not a huge fan of the band's work in general, because I do agree there's some, I mean, they're sort of an avatar for mediocre in a lot of instances, but there is just something about that particular album that really gets me. But yeah, I think I remember seeing them live, and it was all like the rest of the band was on stage, and it was all about Ben Gibbard coming out, and that's when the cheer went up. There was something quite unbalanced about that made me like, I thought this was a band, but that made me really question, like, is this really a band, or is this largely Ben Gibbard and the Death Cab Cuties? I don't. I'm still not entirely sure about where the line is on that one. But I mean, we mentioned Bright Eyes, Conor Oberst.
I was actually going to mention Fevers and Mirrors as being I can take or leave Bright Eyes quite a lot. I find his, I was going to say self-indulgence, and it is a bit self-indulgent, even though Bright Eyes is a band.
Well, it's inherently emo, which is inherently self-indulgent anyway, isn't it?
It's not the self-indulgence that gets me about it. It's just, I don't know. There's something about it which, some of the stuff I love. Fevers and Mirrors I think is a great record. Some of the other stuff I don't really care for, and I think Conor Oberst is a good musician. Some of his contemporaries, like Tim Kasher, for example, from Cursive, his stuff is The Good Year, is great.
She was convinced I was under the influence of all those drunken romantics. I was reading Fonte at the time. I had Bukowski on my mind.
Album of the year is one of those albums that I would probably pick, you know, as part of this singer-songwriter thing. Is it The Good Year? Is that what it's called, a solo thing? He's good, and so I think a lot of Conor Oberst's contemporaries are probably just as good, if not better, than Bright Eyes, I would say.
Well, I guess one of his contemporaries would be Pedro the Lion, right? I can't remember the guy's name. He'd come from a band, I think. And a lot of the Pedro the Lion stuff is full band arrangement, but I think it's very much, I think he is Pedro the Lion.
If you were here, I would admit that I'm an asshole. But now it's over.
I kind of got into him accidentally. I mean, apologies to Conor Oberst and co, but this was at the time when I decided that, you know, LimeWire and, you know, things like
Kazaa and Soulseek and stuff like that.
I just was like ripping stuff, but at that time obviously you had to leave it overnight.
Yeah.
To get an MP3.
I remember.
But I mean, most of the Bright Eyes stuff I had was bits and bobs, so I had like a kind of compilation that I'd assembled. It was the same with Elliott Smith, to be fair. And then I worked backwards, and I didn't really like any Bright Eyes records, albeit there were a couple of tunes that were pretty good. But yeah, Pedro the Lion was sort of the same thing. And again, I got a record by him. The record didn't convince me, but I can see him reflected in a lot of the front men of emo bands now. Good emo bands that perform solo. Our friend Kyle from Lovers Turn to Monsters, I think, channels a lot of that kind of stuff. I think those guys in turn channel a lot of Evan Dando, who was the front man of the Lemonheads back in the 90s, and Evan Dando did a lot of stuff solo as well, and kind of had that really upbeat sort of Beach Boysy, a lot of like major chords vibe to it, but with a little tinge of melancholy in the lyrics and things.
Looking out of them, it's just as well, but you're gonna live to see. I'm gonna ask you why. Either way, you got a bone to pick. Can't you leave that to somebody else?
So yeah, they seem quite key in the evolution of this entire scene of like sensitive guys with guitars, which I would probably say you are, Mark.
Yeah, probably. I was going to mention another sensitive guy with a guitar there called Kevin Devine, who I think I've maybe brought up before.
Yeah, you have.
Fickle friend out in the alleyway, he said, you don't look so good. I said, hey doc, that's great. You started practicing. I never got the no.
probably on the episode with the Manchester Orchestra, because they did 3 Bad Books albums together. I think he's had quite patchy output. He'll often do a fucking great album and then follow up with something that is just a bit mediocre, and he seems to kind of switch that way throughout the course of his career. His first couple of records are pretty decent. He has a really big high point with the third one, Split the Country, Split the Street. Then it's not until another record after that, another 2 records after that, but Brother's Blood, you know. So it takes a while to get to where he wants to go. Quite a prolific guy, really good songwriter, really great voice, and you know he's kind of affiliated. He was quite closely affiliated with Brand New. In fact, I actually think he played guitar for Brand New just before Jesse got cancelled as like a third guitar player. And because I think he probably still is, but he was very publicly quite close friends with Jesse Lacey.
It's an extinction level event for a lot of emo boys, wasn't it?
Totally, man, yeah. Like I said, knows the Manchester Orchestra boys quite well, because obviously they've worked together. Speaking of Manchester Orchestra, their singer, Andy Hull, has got a solo project called Right Away Great Captain.
Away from my body and away from my blood, like a fire that we never lit. Ever seen a man so broken as that one man that you were looking?
Which is like
actually I remember that from the episode about them.
Yeah. Those 3 albums that he's done as Right Away Great Captain is they're kind of like a concept thing, but just him and an acoustic guitar. It really shows off his songwriting now, so I would say.
I've got a couple of judgment calls for you. I mean, what's the deal with Bon Iver? Is that a guy, or is that
a guy? That is a guy.
So that is a guy, right? Because the waters were kind of muddied on Bon Iver for me, because I thought at first it was just a guy, but then it sort of seemed in a lot of the videos that it was very much like a group of 3 core guys who were just. I've never really quite been able to parse what the power balance was in that band, but I think
what's the guy's name? He's inseparable from Bon Iver. What is his name? I can't remember his name, because he ruins a really good POS song on We Don't Even Live Here.
That's right, he does. I mean, I'm happy not remembering the guy's name, because I think the band is so eminently forgettable.
I think Forever's a good record. Forever Forever.
It's nice. I remember being heartbroken over it as well, and then realising what a fucking self-indulgent cheesehead I was.
Come on, skinny love, just let's sing it. For a little soul we will never eat.
He's got a lot to answer for as well, in terms of that.
He does. That's true.
Sort of new folk explosion thing, that pop indie folk music thing that happened. Okay, another one I'd pitch at you. Beirut. Do you know Beirut?
I've heard a few things by Beirut.
And I'll gamble away my friends, and I'll gamble away my time.
Beirut had some. There's a song called Nantes, as in like Nantes from the northwest of France. It's really, really nice. There was some really good bits and bobs. It just, that whole kind of, I don't know even what you call that style. Weird approach that he's got, always playing in threes and stuff. It got a little bit tiresome. I could never stomach it for a full record, but I definitely confess to putting on quite a few compilation tapes. Have you ever heard the guy called Dan Sartain?
No.
And then they break it and they take your skull, and then they shake it, but they're never gonna tell you from the start that the world is gonna break your little heart.
So Dan Sartain toured with Hot Snakes quite a bit, and he was like a real troubadour guy. Like, he played an electric guitar, and the stuff kind of straddled slightly murder ballady, rock, but much more upbeat, much more rock and roll. Some of the kind of like almost like Bill Haley-ish at points. But yeah, Dan Sartain was a really interesting guy. He's got a particularly good track called Gun versus Knife, and people that are into Dan Sartain are pretty diehard on him. John Grant's another one as well. Do you know John Grant's stuff?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
So
yeah.
John Grant sonically is very diverse. In some of these albums he's like full on into electronica, and there's like proper beats going and stuff, but when you watch it's, first of all, foremost, it's very much about him, and some of the most interesting performances are him either solo or him singing with a pianist. But there are full band performances on things like KEXP and Tiny Desks and stuff like that, where you have him playing with like 5 or 6 other musicians. In fact, I think he at one point was backed by the entire band that used to go under the name Midlake, who had a fairly kind of successful indie album called Lido in the 90s. But yeah, I mean, John Grant there's one particular song called GMF, which stands for Greatest Motherfucker, which is fucking outstandingly good. I mean, it is really fucking good.
But I am the greatest motherfucker that you're ever gonna meet. From the top of my head down to the tips of the toes on my feet.
Albeit when he did the Tiny Desks concert, he changed the lyrics, and it's like, dude, the entire selling point of this song is the fact that you say I am the greatest motherfucker that you're ever going to meet. And it's like, because the song works because that's so crass compared to how beautiful the actual song is, and it defeated the point. I don't know why he made that decision. Talking about like Starbucks core and the sort of girls era, sensitive, kind of bohemian Brooklynite drama, Daughter, the act from England.
She's the only one that I have ever loved. And please don't fight her skin when you turn the light.
Oh, God.
Daughter's a funny one though, because again, I thought Daughter was a band, but it seems to have more and more become synonymous with just the front woman of the band. I don't know if it is just her. I think it's possible because I saw Daughter really early on. It was at Oran in Glasgow, and I just assumed it was the group. It was called Daughter. I still, a bit like Bon Iver, I'm still a little bit unsure of where the dividing line is there. I would go to the mat on the fact that the first Beck album is definitely a singer-songwriter album.
Give the finger to the rock and roll singer as he's dancing upon your paycheck. The sails climb high through the garbage pail sky.
A lot of it is either him on an acoustic or an electric, fairly unaccompanied. Even stuff like Loser, you know, he would do it live with a drum machine and things like that. It was very much kind of minimalist, albeit he realised that he could expand his sound hugely after that into the pop stuff he did. Oh, and I never wrote it down, but Jonah Matranga as well, obviously.
I was going to say, like, we can't get past without talking about him. Our good friend of the pod, Jonah Matranga.
Hallelujah, and these days will all go by. Anything I can do to help you through it, I just love to see you smile.
Just to double back on the kind of female thing, I think I really want to shout out Gillian Baker, whose album Turn Out the Lights is just a phenomenal work.
Stop you from leaving. I know that I'm not what you wanted. Am I?
Great songs on it: Appointments, Turn Out the Lights, Shadow Boxing, Claws on Your Back. So many good songs on that record. She's going to go really far. And Phoebe Bridgers as well, both of which are in a band, both of whom are also in a band now called Boy Genius. Both tremendous kind of new school female kind of emo-ish artists. And there's 2 records I really want to pick up because we haven't really spoken about country, and we will talk about country in a minute. Right? But kind of alt country kind of stuff, I'm thinking a couple of the artists that I kind of found out over the course of the last year. A guy called John Moreland.
Slow down easy, I've been hauling a heavy soul, and don't you know, honey, it's time.
Who I think has one of the best voices in kind of rock music. He's a really great songwriter. His album High in Tulsa Heat from Oklahoma is just fucking tremendous, man. His voice, he talks about his voice got so good because he'd be playing in pubs and he had to shout really loud to be heard, so he's got this really loud, amazing, warm, kind of gritty voice, which is nice. And the guy who's like Ryan Adams, but much better, a way better songwriter than Ryan Adams, is Jason Isbell.
So girl, leave your boots by the bed. We ain't leaving this room. Someone needs medical help.
His album Southwestern is one of my favourite things I've heard over the past couple of years. Two kind of alt country artists, both from the South and America, who are more than just like your usual fucking redneck Yoko bullshit. These guys are actually probably closer to alt country, I would say, but are both phenomenal musicians, and you should check out both those albums if that sounds like your kind of jam.
Cool. Well, before we go to our records, I'll just chuck a last few names into the mix that I think we should probably mention. Another one that never, a bit like Sufjan Stevens, never kicked on the way it seemed like it was going to, was Devendra Banhart. Do you remember him? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Dogs, they make up the dark surrounding mountains, they move towards the sea. Light that shine from your womb is blinding, mountains still move towards the sea.
Don't know what happened to Devendra Banhart, just sort of like fizzled out, kind of weird hippie-ish dude. Somebody who has a solo project, which is it's singer-songwriter in the most unconventional way, and I think this is what I'm going to build towards here, is that my choice of an album that is very, very much towards the left field of singer-songwriter stuff. Scotland's very own Adam Stafford. Adam had played in a number of bands. He's from Falkirk, but Adam's solo project is just another level. He's genuinely one of the most gifted guys in the country, without being a very technical musician. I don't think he'd be in the slightest bit offended by that. He just is absolutely full of ideas and tons of really raw emotion, and his performances are incredible, really good. He's got some very, very strong records, and if you're going to listen to a particular song, I would say there's a track called Vanishing Tanks, which is, I mean, if it had been recorded by Talking Heads, it would be massive.
Is it strange that the light from the candle has brought you back to mind? Through the curtain, I trace the outline of your teenage.
He has a real David Byrne energy about him, actually, when he plays live. But Adam has that really left field take on the singer-songwriter thing that I love. And I think that is the side of it that I've grown to love, is people that push. There are some people that are very, very orthodox, very conformist, yet very, very good, because they just have incredible voices, or they just have real charisma. I get that, and I can still enjoy it. But the people that really set my mind alight are people like Adam, people like the act that I've picked. It would be remiss, I think, it'd be remiss to not mention Bill Callahan of Smog, or Bill Callahan, who effectively is Smog. A really enigmatic guy, lots of tremendous albums, and just I think there's a particular track by Smog called The River Guard that I think highlights Bill Callahan and just in his absolute best.
We are constantly on trial. It's a way to be.
But he's been going for years and years and years and years and years now, and he's Bill Callahan fans, that's like a cult, but with some pretty decent justification. So I guess the last thing we should do is probably draw attention to a few Scottish acts.
I was thinking that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to mention it, and I don't particularly care if he hears it, because we all know, because we've done an episode on it, what a big fan I am of the bulk of Idlewild's material. But Roddy Wimble chose to go solo, and the solo material is so fucking skin-crawlingly bad, so painfully self-aware and horribly twee, Scottish, folky, over-egged, knitted jumper, fucking beanie hat, sitting on a fucking badly built stone wall with a cane and sheet in the background. It's fucking painful. I absolutely fucking despise it.
It's pretty much your dad fucking in tartan trousers, isn't it?
I think it's like a weird stab for like authenticity or maturity, but like fucking Idlewild is so good. What the fuck are you doing?
I think there's ways to be Scottish without making it pure twee and like
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, maybe
like
there's
that.
maybe there's just more funding available when you go that way. In fact, there almost certainly is. But folks certainly from Glasgow, there's an act called Aorta Rota, which is, her name's Raquel. She's actually Spanish, but that is very much in the vein of kind of PJ Harvey, just electric guitar, great voice. Loads of charisma, like really, really strong on-stage personality. She's great. I think she's going to do stuff. Siobhan Wilson, who I've mentioned at least half a dozen times in this show, who is, for me, has the best voice in the country.
The fog that clouds the space between disaster and grace, those signs you think you know.
Just a much more orthodox at times, but the sheer performance, the sheer quality and the depth of emotion in the voice is astonishing. And she's not scared to go a little bit off the beaten track with some of the arrangements and compositions. Siobhan's stuff's brilliant. David would gut us from crotch to sternum if we didn't mention Catherine Joseph, who I know he's a huge fan of.
Yeah.
There's the slightly more kind of Scottish folky side of it. People like Rachel Sarmani, who I think is really, really well respected, well regarded, and people like Jen Butterworth as well. Laura Beth Salter. There's a lot of people in and around on the cusp of the folk scene, I think, that are also some of them classically trained. We've mentioned Jerry Cinnamon.
Different from the rest. Diamonds on her finger and she always looks her best. She is a gangster with 100 mile stare when she walks. Her feet don't touch a floor, she is a belter.
Breakout star from Scotland. Never saw that coming, but fair play to the guy, man. You just can't knock him. And then there's names that have been about the Scottish scene for a while now, people like Withered Hand.
He's great.
Yeah, who are really highly regarded. But yeah, so I guess that takes us to our choices. Now, as I said, I've gone very unconventional with my choice.
It's not too unconventional, though. I would say it's not too unconventional. It's a little bit. It veers off into weirdness, but it didn't strike me as being too weird. But you know, it is definitely not conventional.
I think it's about as weird as I could get under the banner of like acoustic singer-songwriter. He's definitely stretching that. So I mean, do you want to go first or will I go first?
You go first. Yeah, you go first.
Right, okay.
Yeah, you've kind of built it up. So
right. So I've chosen the album Outbreeding by a guy called David Thomas Broughton.
A river of love flows through the valley of my heart, and it floods my good.
This album came out in 2011. David Thomas Broughton is very, very hard to really describe and do justice to. He is a musician, but he is also equally a performer and almost a comedian at times. He's a very strange and idiosyncratic mix, and absolutely a troubadour of the highest order. To give you some insight into some of his like little idiosyncrasies, he lived in Pyongyang in North Korea for years, as well as in Seoul. He's from Leeds. When you look up his website, it just says he's from Otley near Leeds. And then under that, it has him classed as a local business in that area. I mean, David's got about, I think he's got about 8 albums of some form or another. I think 1 or 2 of them are collaborative. His debut album in 2005 is called The Complete Guide to Insufficiency, and it was absolutely head-turning I mean, he's operating on a very small scale. I think even now he's still distributed by a totally admirable sort of small label from Edinburgh called Song by Toad. But David's never really gone up to any sort of like medium-sized releases. Stuff's, I think, just a little bit too oddball. But that first album, I think, made a real impact on the sort of alternative kind of underground, certainly in Glasgow. It was recorded solo in a church in Leeds with loop pedals. I would have possibly put it forward. I'll justify that in a second, but there's a track in that called Ambiguity, which is honestly absolutely gorgeous.
How much love can a boy contain in here? How many contradictions can a girl possess up there?
It finishes as well with this kind of looped vocal thing where the layers of voices start to become really choral and hypnotic. I mean, this stuff's tremendous. When I saw him playing live, I've seen him a few times, but he almost always seemed to have a glass of red wine either in his hand or on a stool next to him, and just a multitude of like looping pedals. And he did really odd stuff. He'd unplug his guitar, he'd walk around the room while the loop was playing on stage. He'd like walk into like the toilets and start singing in the toilets and things. I mean, he's really out there. There's even a little film about him which came out in 2016 called The Ambiguity of David Thomas Broughton, and when it came out, I remember being part of a group of people that were trying to organise a premiere for it, and we were trying to contact him in North Korea. It was really, really strange. He had an album in 2016 called Crippling Lack, which I think he recorded by email with people. He collaborated by email with people when he was in Paris, but he was also in North Korea at one point during that project. It features people including Beth Orton and Aidan Moffat.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, he has like people, like admirers in sort of high places. His stuff is something else to behold. Voice wise is very, very distinct. It's got elements, I'd say it owes quite a lot to Leonard Cohen, and it's sort of ear for drama, but I think tonally it also is quite similar to a guy called Jonathan Myberg, who's in a group called Shearwater. Very baritone but theatrical, warbly at times, almost deliberately overplayed, but that sort of fits with that shtick. Like I said, that sort of glass of wine, bits of comedy, just live weirdness. He reminds me, I don't know why, I've never been able to work out what it is about him that reminds me of Daniel Kitson, a really oddball kind of left field English comedian. I think, in fact, I saw David Thomas Broughton described somewhere as a dadaist performance artist crossed with Vic and Bob. So I mean, really, like, the music alone doesn't do justice to just how strange the guy can be. I mean, I think a lot of the performers we've mentioned, especially the ones I've seen, some of them can be good, some of them are great, a lot of them absolutely suck. I think they tend to find a level. David Thomas Broughton fluctuates a lot more. It's totally possible to see him live, and within the course of a concert, the first half will be great, second half will be shit, whatever. I think due to the improvisational style of it, it's very unpredictable, obviously. Much of the set can just be interesting to watch from a sort of cerebral level. It can be amusing. Quite often is really quite funny. It's almost always weird, flat out weird at times, especially when he starts goofing about with some of the bits and bobs of daft technology he brings. I mean, really lo-fi bits of old kit. But the thing with David Thomas Broughton is that unpredictability goes to accentuate that when he connects in a way that I can't emphasise. There's a handful of artists have ever been as touching to witness live as David Thomas Broughton when it comes together. It is honestly something truly astonishing to experience. It really, I didn't even expect it the first time I saw him, and every single time I've gone back, there are always at least one or two points in the set where you are profoundly moved. I'm not talking about, that's a bag and tune. I mean, like, profoundly moved by what the guy is doing. It is just next level, and the fact that it's quite scarce kind of just goes to emphasise the importance of the moment and really appreciating it. It's fucking wonderful. And in fact, the last track in this album is a great example of that. I don't want to pull the album to bits in detail, but I just want to highlight a couple of moments. River Lay, the opening track.
You can waste your life on the banks of the river.
baritone in it's really strong. It's really minimalist at the start. His accent is very much to the fore. I mean, I don't know if you noticed some of the lyrics, but like it won't mean much if you don't have something to say. It's like really leans into his accent a lot. I mean, it's a big part of his style. The second track on that record, Apologies, is so beautiful.
Thinking as I do, as the light touches your face,
it's got this daft little drum machine kicking about in the background, like a really cheap and nasty. It's got this very minimal guitar line, but the voice in that song is absolutely the focal point. It's also a very delicately arranged song. It's really, really tender. It's got little touches of mandolin, glockenspiel, and I don't know whether it's like a wee wind organ or an accordion that comes in, but so effective.
Sleep, my darling. Sleep, my darling. Sleep, my darling, how I love you with such just.
Then you've got tunes like Nature, which is a little bit more of a band arrangement, Perfect Louse.
They play to your virtues, and that you hold over them considerable advantage.
Where he really leans into the vocal delivery. It's got like piano and double bass in it, and I think at this point is when you realise you either love or hate David Thomas Broughton's vocal, because he really amps it up in that one. He also uses the word piffle, which is the most English thing you'll ever hear, and I don't know if I know any other songs that use the word piffle, but I mean, even that song's full of these little sort of silly little very cheap daft keyboard lines to break up the seriousness of it. Tracks like The Potential of Her Progeny,
the potential of our progeny, with your brain,
which has all these backwards loops and it's very woozy, and the vocal samples are dead odd, but he manages to kind of construct it into something quite enchanting. But as I said, I think I'll leave off on my case for David Thomas Broughton with the final track in this, which is actually something of a sort of bonus track. It's like a practice version of the opening track, River Lay, and I think it's just him in a drum kit, like him playing guitar and someone playing a drum kit in a room. Sounds like it's just been recorded with ambient mics, and especially in the first 30 seconds of this performance, his voice, you really get to experience that moment I was talking about where you're like, oh my fucking god, that voice, it is just so silky and smooth and absolutely captivating.
river of love flows through the valley of my heart.
Like hearing it in that raw way, that not that the album's particularly produced, but that last track where you hear him just rehearsing, whew, all the feels, touches the potato, as they say in Spain.
Yeah, I've heard that before actually. Mm-hmm. That saying, not that album.
So how about you?
So I've went with Covering Ground by Chuck Reagan.
Take the road that was cut for you and me. I couldn't wait for the call ever since you were all and everything.
Chuck Reagan, the voice.
Reagan. The voice, yeah. Obviously I can never pick this for the discography, even though it is a lot more unsung than Hot Water Music will ever be. But I would probably go on record as saying this is probably one of my favourite albums of all time. I adore it. I'd liked Hot Water Music quite a lot. I had absolutely no desire to ever pick up and play acoustic tunes ever in my life until I heard this album. It changed. There was something about it which changed the whole way I approach music. And the thing that kind of annoys me about it, which is also one of the reasons why I like it, is like it proves that Chuck Reagan can actually write really interesting, nuanced arrangements and songs, which he kind of just doesn't do in Hot Water Music. But obviously, it's a completely different thing, right?
Yeah, because we had that thing in the Hot Water Music episode where it was like a Chuck song, or what's his name, the other guy, Chris. Yeah.
And like he's clearly capable of writing a lot of really, good sort of country music, I suppose. Is it country? It's alt country, I guess.
I would agree. 'Cause, I mean, this is the first time I've listened to this album, and I did get a very strong feel of alt country. On the right side of that line, I didn't have an adverse reaction to it. I was just like, oh, okay, this has definitely got a sort of hometown sort of vibe to it, something very sort of rural and...
For sure, and it's never overdone either, it doesn't feel as though it's played to the absolute hilt like you would get in a lot of country artists. It's done very sincerely, and it is all about Americana and folk, as opposed to having some beers with the boys in the fucking trailer park or whatever.
It's almost like it's the album for going home to your hometown from the city, getting off tour and going back to see your folks in like this little town. It's sort of, that's the image that I got from the record.
So where this sits in is, I won't talk about this too much, but it sits quite interestingly in his sort of his chronology of his records. So they had an album in 2007 called Feast or Famine, which is basically just him and acoustic guitar with the occasional other instrument. And he did one called Gold Country, where his kind of ambition got a little bit bigger again. And then for me, it kind of comes together most perfectly on Covering Ground. It's got the best selection of songs, good sequencing, and I think sometimes when he brings in other arrangements, it's really great. And then after that, he released one called Till Midnight, which is the full band. It's the full band Americana with pedal steel and fiddle and everything. I could talk about this record for days, but I won't. I'll just go through some of my favourite tracks on it. Kicks off with Nothing Left to Prove, which is a total comer off the road kind of punk rock, heart on sleeve song.
Silence took me, fierce and blindly shadows became one. I found the floor with the broken boards and the grist full of milk gold. So tell me, lady,
basically it's about being on the road and coming home from tour.
Yes, exactly what I was saying. That is absolutely the first track tonally fits well with the album as a whole.
And then you've got Nomad by Fate, which comes after that, which is a much more of an Americana or country vibe.
all I know is nothing's free. Nothing's easy when you're so busted off don't see the
If it's not a cajon, it's definitely just a bass drum anyway, but it's got that kind of percussiveness to it, which you kind of feel. Some other great songs on it, Wish on the Moon.
Sticking to my guns, rolling up the mountains, running down, chasing the sun. Oh, I'm here to get it, I won't quit it, till I'm waking up with the one. Girl of my dreams got me.
Which is, I think it's actually got a bridge which I'm pretty sure is stolen from an Elvis song, and I think it's deliberate because it's the exact same lyrics as well.
That's
it's
alright.
Like, take my hand, take my whole life too.
Yeah, you're right. It does. It has the chunk from falling in. I can't help falling in love with you.
Take my hand, take my whole life too. I haven't bought no ticket, I haven't sold.
Yeah, which is quite nice because the song's about kind of coming home to your love and what that means. A really good song called Valentine, which has a female vocal on it and a really nice fiddle part towards the end, which is lovely and expansive.
There was quite a lot of fiddle or violin fiddle. I'm not
yeah.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
We will dance away, you know, somewhere high up in the snow. After rain is grown to cold, and where the heavens meet the earth.
Meet You in the Middle, the second last song, that's got Brian Fallon from the Gaslight Anthem on it. And they do like a call and response vocal.
I told myself I would not fail, I would not fall, I would prevail. It just takes one hit to put you in your place. Takes one hit to put you in your place. Well, tell me what you want.
He doesn't really play it live very much, probably because it's really difficult to do on your own, and trust me, I've tried a lot. The chorus doesn't quite land unless you've got that other vocal behind you.
I really hope you're doing a version of this from your bedroom soon on a like a Facebook stream that we can tune into.
Yeah, it'll be an unsung.
Mark tried to do both vocals, or you could record it with you doing Chuck's part, and then record another video of you doing the Gaslight Anthem guy's part. Then just split the window, and there you go, man.
That's a good shout, actually. Maybe I'll do that. And it ends with my favourite song on it called Lost and Found, which I don't know if that's a mandolin or a banjo that's picked on, but it starts off with that, and it's a really gentle kind of slow burner.
More moments of time do pass, they're burning like photographs. Sometimes it's hard to rest.
It's just that, you know, we've spoken, as I say, we've spoken, the accusation has been made in the past to me that I'm a very earnest songwriting person, and this is that. You know, it's the exact opposite of what Chuck does in Hot Water Music in every single capacity. There's a running joke amongst people that like punk music as much as I do. There comes a point when you get to probably your mid-30s where you put down the electric, and you pick up the acoustic, and you start fucking making beer and wearing flannel and, and just doing it on an acoustic guitar.
You're killing it.
That's exactly what that is. This record is totally that, down to a T. His solo stuff is all about that, but I like his approach to it. Something he said resonated with me in an interview once, and it was like, I'm only going to put out a solo record if every single song that I put on it is, I feel as though it's one of the best songs I've ever written, and if I don't feel that, then it's not going to go on there. So God knows how many songs he's written, because if he's picking the best for the album, because he treats it just like work, because it is work, you know, that's his job, and also the fly fishing store that he now owns in California.
Which kind of fits with the whole vibe anyway, yeah.
Totally does, yeah. But for me, this is an album that makes me smile. It's warm, it's full of heart, it is earnest. It's the record you come home and write after you've just been on tour with a gruff punk band for like 300 days. Yeah,
or you're on tour strumming away in a guitar in a hotel room, putting these ideas down, and it sort of reflects that isolation and what you're thinking about. Yeah, I mean, one thing that really came from, I'm not gonna get a lot of listens out of this album. It's not something that speaks to me massively, but at the same time, immediately objectively, I was like, oh, this is pretty well done. I really admired the nakedness of it. It's quite a minimalist album. It's not got a lot going on in terms of the way of like multi-tracking or padding. He's really left a lot of things out there. There's little imperfections and a lot of little detail that's quite nice, makes it quite personal. So yeah, I mean, I was impressed with the approach to the album, and whilst musically it neither clicks nor offends me, it's totally fine. It was hats off. I was like, alright, cool, I see where this guy's going with this, and this is actually a really good example of this. So yeah, I can totally understand why you feel this one.
It's probably worth noting that his voice is fucking stunning as well.
His voice is great. I mean, that's like, we're going right back to that rule we're talking about with solo acoustic singer-songwriter type stuff. It takes like a 9 or a 10 out of 10 factor for something to stand out. If Chuck didn't have that voice, then this album would get lost in the pack, definitely.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you don't hear the Hot Water Music at all, maybe more than your stuff, but when it is naked and stripped back like this, you're like, holy shit, that guy's got range and power, and he sounds like he's been gargling gravel for the past 40 years.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that goes a long way, certainly with kind of Americana stuff, to have that gruffness. Yeah. Cool. That's an interesting choice, man. Yeah, absolutely. It's very you, but it's top tier.
I'm a bit gutted that I can't ever do it for the show because of Hot Water Music, but people need to listen to it if they like Hot Water Music and if they like kind of punk. And I should say about your choice, man, like, I hated his voice to start with, but it grew on me over the course of the record. Yeah,
he is very Marmite to people. I mean, absolutely. I was lucky enough to see it live at first, and it went right through me, in that it went right through my heart, not as in that it went right through me. Like some of that. Yeah, I see how I chose my words badly there.
Yeah.
But it definitely goes right through some people, no doubt. But I think you really have to be on the page with it and be like, oh, right, this is part of it. This is part of this project. He knows that is theatrical. He knows that's OTT. And yeah, you got to take it for what it is. Take it or leave
it.
But it's, I mean, if you get it, it is beautiful. And as I said, live, I have had some of the most profound musical moments at his concerts. It really does. When he clicks in a way that very, very, very few people can ever hope to.
It's good. It's a good choice, man. And people go check them out. Both those records should be quite good for these kind of sunny-ish days, right?
Yeah, they're not too bad. I mean, it's light, it's breezy, and plus you're probably sick to the back teeth of watching people sitting on the edge of their bed doing fucking emo covers of pop songs, which seems to be so fucking in vogue. Oh, hey, look, here's me doing an earnest version of some shit Rihanna song that was written by a committee of 50 people. Oh, isn't that fucking great? Added an emotional depth to something that was written to take money off Wayne's. Yeah, We'll probably revisit this at some point, because I'm almost certain Dave will have quite a few good suggestions, and I mean, even in that list there were so many that we just had to skim across. It would be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and people can join us next week for our regularly advertised programming.
Yes, so we go to talk about J Dilla, who is a solo artist, I suppose, on this record that we've picked.
Donuts.
Donuts. I was really excited to do the episode because I'd done a ton of research, and that guy was... I said at the end of the last episode that he was very influential, right? But I had no fucking idea just how influential he was. It's pretty staggering.
And in the meantime, if you happen to be on Facebook or whatever and come across a really average home acoustic performance, let them know.
And let us know, just without any, just tag us, and
tag us next to your insult to them. So it has to be a witty insult. Don't just say rude words. But
you're pish.
Yeah, and we want tagged in that so that we can appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you.
If it falls squarely in a category, then please make us aware.
Okay, folks. Until next week. Ciao.
Bye.